moving on again. Last week, if you remember, we looked at personal differences. How many of you had a look at your profile after the lecture? What did you discover about yourself? Was it interesting? Did any of you end up at either of the extremes, at the very low score or the very, very high score? In other words, very, very masculine or very, very female? Many? Just one or two. How many of you ended up near the middle? Those of you who were in the middle have an amazing gift, because it means you can understand and communicate with people either side of you. You can be the person who can act as the interpreter between one or other extreme. If you can carry that ability into other areas to be able to understand two different sets of language and be able to translate between those languages, that's incredibly valuable. You can become a really great business analyst or someone who can map the ideas of technology into the ideas and language of business and vice versa. If you want to become a business systems analyst, or you want to have that ability to talk to people about technology, but without using the language of technology, that's valuable. You can become a great systems analyst, a person talking both ways. Or to go way, way back in mythology, to Janus, the god with two faces. He was able to talk both ways, both languages, to translate between different languages. It's an incredible gift. So those in the middle, don't think there's a problem with your gender. Think of it as a brilliant, brilliant gift of communication, folks. It's really very, very valuable. And I think one of the lessons is to be able to, will have come from the assignments that you've written, those articles you've written, trying to make a particular aspect of a change in technology over the last 20 odd years or so, 20, 30 years. Making that interesting to people who don't understand the language of technology. Those are the ones of you who are going to be really, really successful. When I'm about to start marking all of those, it'll be another couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, before we have actually been able to complete the marking of everybody's. And then we will release the marks to all of you, and you'll be able to see just how well you've all done. Now today, we're going to be looking at another aspect of communication. How to use presentations to best effect. And as we go through the material for this afternoon, think about how you could possibly turn that article you've written into a short 8-slide presentation to capture the things that have changed and why they are so valuable. Try and put it into about 8 slides. And you'll see as we go through the slides today on here, I will be hoping that you will be able to put those into the context of a little exercise to then summarize your article into a little presentation that you could give to your friends, your family, to say why they ought to read that article that you've written that hopefully will be published sometime over the next few months. Talking of which, I would like 1 or 2 of you to volunteer and email me. You know my email address. Email me to volunteer to edit the chosen articles, those that get more than 60% or 60% and above, into an e-book. That Computers for Everyone journal that we're going to publish sometime next term with a bit of luck, or maybe over the summer if it takes a bit of time for you guys to do it. So I'd like a couple of volunteers, please. Not now, but think about it. and think about the fact that that will give you something on your CV that most of your colleagues from around the other universities in the country will not have. You have edited an e-journal for your colleagues. And that will be a valuable CV entry for you to have when you apply for jobs at the end of, or middle of next year for your placement, and then later on for your jobs out there in the big wide world. So you've seen a lot of different styles perhaps of presentations over this last 10 weeks. And I'll bet almost every single one has been based around the use of Microsoft PowerPoint, almost certainly. But before we go into some guidelines and some tips, hints and tips about creating a presentation of any sort, I want to show you a different sort of presentation style. How many of you have heard of Prezi? Well, most of you. How do you like Prezi? Pardon? Terrible, great, varied. For those of you who haven't, and for those of you who have, I'll just show you a short YouTube version of a Prezi presentation so that you can use what you see in the next couple of 3 minutes as part of your basis for the critique of how to create presentations that we'll cover a little bit later on. So let's go to the presentation on Prezi via YouTube and see what you think of it.
Do you want to become a motivational speaker? Then you ought to learn how to get paid for sharing your message. Having shared...
Your
Okay, so what was your reaction to that sort of way of using a presentation? Pardon? So that's a useful comment, something.
A little over the top.
A little over the top. What do you mean by a little over the top like that?
A lot of movement of the camera, lots of unnecessary graphics, just sort of brought it away with, maybe a bit distracting.
Very distracting, or a bit distracting, a lot of movement. Yeah.
A lot of the data is misrepresented, like it's really hard to read, like on pie charts, which is wrong.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in a sense, to do them justice, they were trying to show that a pie chart like that, which is often presented, might not be very helpful, but it doesn't really matter what the medium is, whether it's Prezi or PowerPoint or anything else. You have to choose carefully how to do it. You think it was more engaging than PowerPoint? In what sort of way?
I mean, like, it was more dynamic. When you look at PowerPoint, it's just like static, so like, it's kind of more just like, sudden change, you kind of feel more interested.
So it's less static, yeah. Okay, fair point. And
it seems that a presentation using Prezi would actually be very hard to create.
I think, well, it might be. It's yet another tool that you have to learn how to use, certainly. Whether it's more difficult, well, has anybody used Prezi for their own presentations? Is it hard to use? Not particularly, just a different way of working.
Just, it's more useful in the sense that you can also use like group presentations, considering it's posted online, so you can have multiple people working on the same slide.
Ah, because it's online, you can have multiple people working on it. That's maybe a good case, but then surely if you use some of the other online groupware like Google Docs or Microsoft 365, where you can get people to share, that might still achieve that same aim. So be careful how you actually give the critique. Think about the broader implications of other ways of getting sharing. So, yep, good point, no. Anybody else? How many felt, oh sorry, yep.
It seems more informal.
Seems more involved. Why?
Because it's all happy, smiley, that kind of stuff.
It's all happy smiley. Do you not think we could use the same sort of happy smiley graphics inside other things like PowerPoint?
Not in business, it just seems out of place.
Okay, right. Now, how many of you guys are feeling slightly seasick as a result of seeing everything wafting around and so on? Just one or two? Yeah? There's a comment up the top there.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, right, sorry. No, I think so. I would disagree, and I'd say it's sort of less interactive than. I can't remember what the original point I was replying to is, sorry.
Okay. But I mean, do you think that a group of senior business execs are going to respond well to that sort of ducking and diving and swirling and swooping?
It looks too childish.
Look childish. Yeah. Maybe that's because how they presented it. You don't have to create it like that in Prezi. You could do something very similar, actually, to little frames that are very similar to PowerPoint type of structure.
Flash presentations similar to that, but without the graphic. It like zooms out and zooms into another place.
Yeah. You can do that with Flash, perhaps, as well. Yeah.
And it makes it feel less like disorienting in Flash.
So if you did it in Flash, it might be less disorientating. Okay, yep.
I think it's more suited to a more creative type of business.
Suitable to more creative types of business. Okay, right. Any other thoughts? Okay, so what we've got is a set of critiques of the way it was presented and a little bit about the technology itself. Now, if you think about most of our technology assisting tools, like whether that's Prezi, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and many other tools, what we have to separate out is the way that it's used to present ideas from the actual technology itself. And the reality is you can actually achieve pretty much the same or very similar sorts of things in both PowerPoint and in Prezi. It's just that Prezi being newer, there are a lot of advocates who are using it in this sort of style, in a more innovative style, who can't be bothered or don't see the need to put the effort in to learn how to do something similar in PowerPoint. Because many of the tools are there. And you can create Prezi-based presentations which are just as disastrous as the worst type of PowerPoint presentations, and vice versa. So you need to think more about what am I trying to achieve and how should I do that best in my chosen tool, rather than saying, oh well, this tool is better and I don't suppose I can do it in this other tool, but maybe you can. So think about the different tools and see what you can actually do before you dismiss one or the other. The same goes for all of those languages, those computer programming languages that you're going to be exposed to. In most of the languages you can do pretty similar things, but in different ways, different techniques, different sort of structures will allow you to achieve pretty much the same sort of thing. It's just that sometimes it's easier in one language than in another language. Okay, there are going to be some languages where you can do things which you cannot do in anything else, and you need to find those. But in presentations, you know, look at Prezi, look at PowerPoint, look at some of the other ones that are out there, and see which ones you can use for best effect. But think about the message first. Think about the audience first. See what they will respond to best in terms of the way that you're going to present things. And as you say, that was a very childish looking one, and I certainly feel very seasick at the end of something like that. One or two of you do as well. And when I've shown this particular sort of Prezi presentation to people, a lot of people in the audience over the last year or two have kind of felt very uncomfortable just because of that ducking and diving and weaving and twisting and everything else, and zooming in and zooming out. You could have achieved a better, or they could have achieved a better result that wouldn't disturb too many people, that wouldn't look so childish, but would look professional. And you can do that in many different approaches. So, let us remind ourselves a little bit about what we're trying to do. Use the ideas that we're going to come up with today to try and create that little 8-slide presentation of your article as a way of kind of reinforcing today's learning. It could be, you could do an alternative one about which summarizes the whole of this term's work in this session. What do I need to do to become an excellent learner, an excellent employee? Or a summary of your article. Don't mind which you choose, but something that will help you to focus on how to convey a message, having decided what the message is. Typically, you'd have one slide, which is that front page that gives the title and details about you, a little introduction, a little context of what the presentation is about, ideally an aim and a couple of objectives or so that the viewer, the audience, understands very clearly what you're trying to convey. Then your main points, and then a single slide at the end just to pull it all back together again. This is what we have concluded. A nice, simple, standard sort of structure. And then go back to what we covered a few weeks ago. The what question, what do I want, versus what do I need to say. In your presentation about your article, well, you want to say all that you've put into your article. But in those 8 slides, which really ends up with about 3 or 4 slides of the content, you've only got space for the really, really critical items of the message. Very, very concise to give your audience the key questions. the key points. What do I want or need to say? Why? And think about the why, because that will help you to choose, to some extent, the style that you are going to use. If you think about that little YouTube video we've looked at, the reason they chose that style was to kind of shock us into thinking about something new, a different way of doing things. To shock us into thinking and getting out of our kind of traditional approach to communication. To shock us into thinking there may be a new way of doing it. So that answers to some extent the why that they used that approach. Childish though some of you thought it was, or some of us all thought it was. Now the who is crucial again. Who do you think they were trying to get at with that little style of presentation? Who was their audience? Any thoughts about who they were, people who produced Prezi thought was their audience for that little video? Because ultimately the question is, did it work? Did that sales pitch work for you guys? Who did it work for to convince you that you would actually go and try using Prezi? Anybody? 2 or 3. How many did it actually backfire and convince you wouldn't even think of trying it? Quite a lot more. Yeah, interesting. So they obviously weren't trying to target you guys, the ones who just put your hands up, for some reason. And then the time. How much time have I got to present? Those are, if you remember, the critical questions about communicating, whether it's for a presentation or for an article or anything else, or a book. Let's just narrow it down to a presentation. That first question, the what do I need to say? And we go back again to the question of, is it an informing or a persuading type of presentation? So look at that presentation. What do you think were the answers that they came up with in terms of those questions? Was it an informed type of presentation, or was it a persuasion presentation? Who saw it as an informed type of presentation about the capabilities of Prezi? Who saw it as their attempt to persuade us out there? So that was, the majority think it was a persuasion type of communication exercise. Did it succeed in persuading you to try out Prezi? No. Pity that, because that was their master advertising. What was the summary? Summarize the message. What was it that they wanted to tell us about this new way of giving presentations? What was their message, fundamentally? One part of the message was use Prezi. That old PowerPoint presentations get a bit stale. Yep. Anything else? It's cool to use Prezi? Perhaps. Do you think they could have given more focus if they'd cut it down, made it a bit shorter? No? No thought. Pardon? Yeah, you think they could have cut it down a bit? What do you think they were actually thinking about in terms of the why do they want or need to say it? What do you feel that they were getting at there? What was the challenge that they were trying to give us in that style of presentation, that content that they gave us? Do you think it was because it's a new product, they want to get the message out there so that we can start thinking about it? In other words, classic marketing, classic advertising. Was that what it was? Yeah. Yeah, probably right. It's new, let's tell the world about it. Now, going back again to thinking about where we're starting from, what assumptions did they make about we, the audience? Did they assume that we knew a bit about Prezi? Did they think we knew a bit about making presentations and putting them together? What do you think their fundamental assumption was about the audience? So an assumption about ignorance of the specific product, yep. They assume we know about PowerPoint, yep. What else is there? What other assumption are they making about our understanding or our thoughts about PowerPoint?
They assume that the audience is getting sick of constantly using PowerPoint.
An assumption that we're sick of the boredom of standard PowerPoint. What aspects of PowerPoint do you think that we are particularly sick of?
I think they think that we're sick of the fact that it's just constant slides and just someone droning on.
Constant slides and someone droning on. So how did they provide an alternative there? Because they were giving us little slides, just like that.
They were making the cameras zoom in and rotate around, move around and give people seasickness.
Yeah, rotation and zooming and seasickness. Sorry, you were saying up there? But you said something up there, a contribution? A roller coaster of fun. We can make a roller coaster of fun out of presentation. That's an interesting approach, yeah. So they didn't summarize other than make it quite clear that the foundation was we are bored with traditional presentations. We're bored of people droning on and reading large amounts of text. But do we have to create a presentation in PowerPoint like that? Do we?
I think the problem is they're sort of assuming that the audience that actually making the video for are not power users. They're people that are just going to boot up a standard template and sort of whack some text in and just use it like that. Which is why for them that's great, because in this case they've got another standard template that's different to their usual standard templates, so you can chuck everything in there and it looks different. But if you, with PowerPoint, if you wanted to, you could just, go outside what you're used to, you could add in more animations, you don't have to use normal templates.
That actually is an interesting point, because you're actually asking a fundamental question about what is the backdrop to a lecture about, a backdrop to a presentation to a business audience about. Is that really the total content that you expect the presenter to read, or is that just a kind of index to the next 3, 4, 5 minutes of engaging discussion? And if you think about it in that sense, is a little aide-memoire to the presenter, it's an aide-memoire to the audience. This is about what it's about. And then I can sit back and I can listen and be engaged by the presenter. Now, if the presenter happens to want to spend the time talking with that backdrop, then it's up to the presenter to provide the mechanism for engagement in the way they present, they stand, they move, they maintain eye contact, provide interesting ideas. Because it's not always very helpful to have lots of little video clips spattered around a presentation. It may not actually achieve what you're trying to do, whether to inform or to persuade. if you've got about 10 minutes to spare to give this presentation in, this is the amount you've been given. Now, that's about the number of slides you can really cope with. Otherwise, you're going to get the, whether it's in a Prezi type of little snapshotty bits, or whether it's in a PowerPoint or anything else, or even 8 pages that have been turned into a PDF that you just page through, doesn't really make much difference. You have to think about how much time do I need to spend on each individual picture or each individual slide. How quickly can I get through them without making the audience feel, ow, I'm getting bombarded with information. I remember, when was it? When I was at Rolls-Royce, I guess it must have been in the mid-90s. One of our ex-directors came back to take over a group, and he spent 3 months talking to a whole range of people about ideas for the new direction of that particular division. He could talk even faster than I talk, and for 45 minutes he machine-gunned the audience of about 300 senior managers with his ideas. Various slides showing what was going on, but mostly he was just continuously machine-gunning us with words. And, you know, it didn't make much difference whether he had one slide for 5 minutes or one slide for a minute. That torrent of words poured out at us, and we had hardly any time to think about what he'd been talking about, to reflect upon what he was talking about, to try and knit the ideas together. We had to go away and think about it if we could remember any of it. He was probably running at 200, 250 words a minute, which is pretty much the top end of what we can actually, the rate at which we can speak and be understood. Your objective is not to try and get 200 words a minute, 8 minutes, wow, 1,500 words. That would give you the chance to read your article at a flat-out rate. And would that be successful? What would your audience think if you presented your article by reading it 200 words a minute? You'd get lost, absolutely. And the danger is that in doing it at that speed, you would be talking at a very boring monotone, ever so quickly, just like this, and we would switch off. Because we don't like listening to high-speed monotone. So you need to think, how do I get the message for 10 minutes on 8 slides, of which only 4 slides are the basic message? Now, the critical point about slides is they shouldn't have very much text on them. A good idea is keeping them very, very simple. No more than 4 or 5 bullet points, large text. It is very rare, if you're giving a presentation of your ideas, rather than providing some notes for a lecture that is going to be useful after the lecture, it's very, very rare that you need to put in a paragraph of text. Even 3 or 4 lines of 18-point text is too much to have on a slide. The audience, that's you guys, don't really have time to read 4 or 5 lines of text and listen to to the presenter. From your perspective, giving a presentation, you want the audience to read that as quickly as possible. You want to give them 5-10 seconds at most to quickly absorb the context for the next few minutes of discussion. From your point of view as a presenter, you then need to know what you're talking about so you don't have to look at it. It should all be in your head. Now, if it's your first presentation, you're going to need to practice a bit so that you get the timing right. After you've given a few presentations, you begin to get used to how you create your slides. And you get used to knowing how much time to spend talking about each slide to convey that message, so that it sticks in your audience's head, in their mind, in their memory. The slide up there, and all of the slides, are there to provide a very, very quick way of the audience understanding where you're going to go next. Now, in PowerPoint and many other types of presentation mechanism, you've got an amazing range of special effects. We saw with Prezi the way that it circles around. What they did, they basically used the globe that they started with and finished with as a way of locating each little bit of the message. And then you kind of create a little timeline trace so that you pick up each little block of text, each diagram, each video, all those little bits that they've got in there so that they come in and blow up to the right size as you have designed it to be. That provides a lot of movement. You can do quite similar things in PowerPoint with fade in and fade out, with things coming in from the top and from the right and from the bottom and sideways, with shutter mechanisms so it looks as though they're fading together and overtaking each other. You can set it up so that you press the button on there to advance to bring in each line of text one by one by one by one. And you end up with the same sort of seasickness effect if you're not careful. You can end up with a lot of irritation building up. Because the majority of people who use all of these clever fade in, fade out and visual effects in PowerPoint are the people who love graphics and love movement. And are trying to show off often how good they are at all the special effects in that particular chosen tool. Whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's Prezi. But you, in giving a presentation, are not trying to show how clever you are at building a presentation. If you want to do that, go and teach people how to use it, to show people how clever you are at using the tool. But if you're giving a presentation, you are trying to convince people about your message, not your cleverness with a particular tool. Your audience couldn't care less, by and large, about how clever you are with all the special effects. They are only interested in the message that you are there to give. The fewer special effects that you use, the better. The fewer clever, beautiful, wonderful backgrounds you use, the better. Because often the background will then interfere with the message you're trying to provide. You may get colour contrast. You may get light and shade, which hides part of your message. I remember a presentation, a group presentation that a group of students gave me a couple of 3 years ago, and they had the most beautiful graphic of a dragon. It happened that they were such a small team of Chinese students who were trying to say, this is us. Here is our message about some Chinese banks. This is in a business module. Unfortunately, whilst it was a marvellous, beautiful dragon as a backdrop, it was almost impossible to read any of the text that was actually there on the slides. The background swamped and hid and confused. That's why I use this particular background. I use this Streams template out of PowerPoint because it has this beautiful dark blue background, and it has white text normally, but I switch it to gold because gold text on blue has been shown over the years to be one of the most effective ways of ensuring the message is visible and it doesn't confuse people who might have a red, green, or various other colour-blind problems. It's very, very good because the contrast is not too high, which confuses some people who can't cope with the white or the black on white text that is so prevalent. This has been a standard for about 25, 30 years if you want to really get the message clearly across and undistracted by the background. Now, I'm not here to give you all of the advice about creating a presentation. We could have several lectures and seminars and workshops on it. So you need to find a good book or good guidelines, maybe on the internet. There's YouTubes out there that tell you lots of advice. There's lots and lots of web pages of good advice for how to create a decent presentation. Good advice on things you should not do, and I'll give you the link in a little bit. Google, YouTube are always going to be great resources for finding out how to do anything, whether it's a presentation, how to construct a presentation, finding good backgrounds, good templates. But when looking at templates, again, match the template to what you are trying to achieve with those 4 questions we started off with. That 7 sins of presentations is really, really great. Some of the things I've talked about, I learnt at a training course in Rolls-Royce Aerospace back in the early 80s about how to give presentations effectively. So use the internet to get great guidelines. Look for YouTube clips, particularly of things not to do. Identifying those great sins of PowerPoint presentations. Because PowerPoint is the de facto standard, and so many people use PowerPoint very, very badly. Too much text, too many special effects, cause confusion, cause irritation, send the audience to sleep, and they forget about the presenters, forget about the message, they forget about the audience, and they forget about how to inform, they forget about how to persuade. So I'll just flip over to that little website there. And you'll probably be able to associate with those first 2 or 3 items very, very easily. And you'll see lots of links to different resources that will illustrate the point, or give you resources, give you ideas. Follow those through because they will help you to become really great communicators. And one of the enormous problems that most employers are finding with graduates is that they don't communicate very well. They've not learned, not practiced, how to communicate persuasively. They haven't learned how to condense their thoughts into that persuasive communication that's necessary. So over the next few weeks and months, I would like you to remember and keep coming back to this part of your resources on course resources, to keep thinking about and developing and improving your skills to become the ace communicators of this university. And if you can do that, you will become pretty good, if not leading communicators, as you go out into the world to do your jobs that you're training for here. Because communication is one of the most critical skills amongst many others, but it is really critical that you should develop that ability to communicate. Too many ers, too many ums, too many so's at the beginning of sentences and so on. They're all things that detract from that professional image you're trying to develop to become some of the most employable graduates in 2016, 17, will it be? Maybe 2018. That's your objective, folks, to become most employable. This is going to be part of how you can become really, really employable, folks. Okay? Thanks very much.